What the heck is going on with the Discovery class? I think that's a question I've been getting a lot of, well, for a number of years now, but seemingly, I think in 2025, I've gotten this question even more than ever. And that's because Royal Caribbean has hinted here and there about it building of its newest cruise ship class. And it's been rumored to be called the Discovery class. I mean, Royal Caribbean has said it. They've done everything but actually announce a thing. There's been so much hinting and winking and nudging and everything else in between that you could possibly do to talk about something that officially doesn't exist and hasn't been formally announced. And I know if you're like me, you're also sitting there thinking, when are they going to at least announce it? Because we understand that there's a long run up for a ship to actually be built. If we remember the Icon class ships, that was like 7 years from like start to finish. And we're not exactly sure where we are in this journey, but Royal Caribbean has been talking about the Discovery class ships for a number of years. And basically, if you're unfamiliar with the Discovery class, essentially it is the new class of ship that is going to be smaller. And I use air quotes here because really, when we're talking about it, I mean, smaller is a relative term. The only thing we absolutely know is the Discovery class will be smaller than the Icon class. Beyond that, it could still be like 4,900 passengers, and that would satisfy the thing. I think there's been a lot of wishful thinking and a lot of creative assumptions when it comes to this because people hear smaller and they think, oh, okay, like, 2,000-3,000 passengers. And they could be right. I don't think that's right. And this is why in this week's episode, I wanted to focus on what we've heard recently. I didn't want to put out a brand new video to talk about what we've kind of covered in the past. Something fundamentally has changed, but there have been a couple different comments I wanted to highlight and an opportunity to revisit this particular topic. Because if you're like me, you're also sitting here looking at your watch and just like, okay, when's it going to happen? So basically, there was a media event on Star of the Seas a couple weeks ago that I wasn't on for because I got the choice of either going to Star of the Seas in Puerto Rico or to go for the media cruise, quote unquote, that happened, I believe, on the 13th of August. And I went about a week earlier. And of course, I went on the week earlier because I want to be able to get, first look at the ship and be able to share it with all of you before, everybody else. So that is a no brainer. However, when we were on that sailing, we didn't have access to any executives on board to talk with them. And when you do a traditional media cruise, I should say, like we have in the past, there's usually some sort of a press conference, if you will, a media panel in which a number of executives talk about things. And in this case, on Star of the Seas, there were some executives that talked about the some of the projects coming up for Royal Caribbean that go beyond Star of the Seas. And Michael Bailey, who's the CEO of Royal Caribbean, did speak on this subject, and the Orlando Sentinel posted a summary of it. It's the first I've seen of it, and I wanted to talk about it because, but before we start going into his quotes here, don't worry, nothing's been formally announced. If something actually was announced, like I would obviously do more than a podcast on it, we'd have full wall-to-wall coverage. But Mr. Bailey did say, quote, "We're already deep into the design of a new class. We're constantly looking at designing for the future. A whole group of us probably spend 50% of our workday designing for the future of Royal Caribbean, either destinations or ships. It's fantastic and a lot of fun," end quote. Okay, so the second part of that quote is kind of not relevant. That's more of a like we're always dreaming up big things. That's good marketing talk. That's like, hey, we're always dreaming, we're always imagining, we're moving forward, right? No, they're not content with just the same old, which of course, you could say almost certainly any cruise line or any company should be doing that anyway, which is that they're, you're operating the day-to-day operations, but you're also, working on the future, right? But the most important quote there is the beginning of it when he said, "We're already deep into the design of a new class." That's not news. We had an update about a month ago from Vicky Freed, who also said the same thing, that they're in the design process. And I've seen and heard very similar things from other executives around Royal Caribbean, that they're still basically in the design process. Now, to what end? I don't know. I mean, they could be 98% done and they're trying to nail down the last 2%. They could be back to 5% done and they're still dreaming up ideas. In my not expert opinion, because I've never been involved in any design meetings with Royal Caribbean, I'm imagining there's a lot of spitballing. There's a lot of what ifs, a lot of I'm just imagining this board on a wall and they have these sticky notes of ideas and things. And, idea goes up on the sticky board and idea comes down. And then next week, something else comes up there. And, it's this collaborative effort to kind of figure out and nail down ideas. We've seen this before with Icon of the Season, its development, where they had ideas that made it on there and then didn't make it on there and then back on again. And they basically, I think they're in somewhere in that phase still. Because my understanding, what I've been told a couple times, is that when and if the Discovery class gets approval, what has to happen first and foremost, it has to get board approval. So before they do anything, before they order anything, before they announce anything, it has to be approved by the board of directors. So, they present it like, here's our new ship we're thinking about. We're anticipating this size, this much revenue, blah, 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 blah. And then the board of the directors, says yay or nay. If they say yay, they move forward. Otherwise, if they say nay, they go back to the design process. And if they say yay, well, now they have to go place an order. And in order to get an order, you first of all have to agree with a shipyard to get a slot, a space for your ship to be built. And of course, then there's the cost, right? They say, okay, we want to build this ship, and it's got this features, this dimensions, and blah, blah, blah. And the shipyard says, okay, it'll cost you, $1 billion with a B. And then the cruise line, of course, doesn't have $1 billion. So they go, okay, BRB. And they go to the bank and they get a loan for it. And then at this point, once the order is secured, then they typically announce it. So we're not anywhere near, we're still in step one here. We're still in the design process. We have to get to the board of directors. And as far as I know, it has not made it that far, but that's kind of part of it. There was another quote in the article from Jay Schneider, who's Royal Caribbean's Chief Product Innovation Officer. And he talked about a lot of different projects they're working on, but also about the Discovery class that, quote, we're more in the dreaming phase. We're dreaming up future classes of ships that are big and small, you name it. We're in a heavy ship dreaming phase right now. Now, again, nothing confirmed. That was an end quote, by the way. Nothing confirmed, but I did like that last part. We're in a heavy ship dreaming phase right now, which to me means they're not just thinking Discovery class. They're thinking maybe Discovery class plus another big ship class. They're like maybe something bigger than the Icon class, or replacement for the Oasis class. I mean, it's kind of weird to me that we're in a period of time right now where the Voyager class is more than 20 years old, where the Oasis class ships are coming up on that 20-year mark as well. And it's really weird. It's like surreal if you think about it, because a lot of I've kind of grown up with these ships being quote unquote new ships. So it's kind of strange to me to think about them as, middle-aged, if not old by this point. I mean, it wasn't too long ago when you talk about a 20-year-old cruise ship, you'd be talking about it leaving the fleet. That's no longer the case, I think, in the industry, thanks to refurbishments and the upkeep that cruise lines do. A 20-year-old ship has a lot more shelf life than it did back in the 90s. But nonetheless, to answer the question about the Discovery class, is they are very much still in that phase of dreaming, doing, and it's not really ready for prime time. Now, you might say, well, maybe they're being facetious about it. You might be right. I would say that when it comes to the Discovery class, I think they like to announce things when they can. I think they're generally pretty bad about keeping secrets about that, because once they place an order, let's put it that way, when you place an order with a shipyard, not only is it a bit of public knowledge because the shipyard's going to know about it, and they oftentimes place updates on their own websites, but because they are taking out loans, as I mentioned earlier, that requires a formal filing with the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. And so they have to disclose that information. And if you take out like $1 billion, it's kind of sticks out like a sore thumb that, hey, there's something going on over here. So the question obviously is, how big is small? How much bigger or smaller is the Discovery class going to be? And is it going to fit into other places? Because I think the idea was, once upon a time, Royal Caribbean said that the Discovery class was supposed to replace the aging Vision and Radiance class ships to some extent, because those ships are really long in the tooth. And I really believe if there hadn't been a pandemic in 2020, that we wouldn't have any more Vision class ships in the fleet. I really think they were supposed to get rid of Grandeur. I think it would have been by now, 5+ years later, if the others would have been gone anyway. But anyway, that didn't happen. So I think, number one, that statement leads a lot of people to believe that it is going to be a similar size ship, which I disagree with. I think it's going to be, as the Royal Caribbean has said, a smaller ship. There was a quote, and let me get that quote. It was I mentioned earlier, Vicky Freed talked about it, and all they said was that it was going to be smaller than the Icon class, and that was all they were going to say. Quote, the Discovery class will be a smaller ship than Icon. That much we can tell you. That was the quote there. So if I had to guess, if I had to put money down, number one, I don't think it's any smaller than 4,000 passengers. Like I don't think there's a place in this world in which Royal Caribbean builds a smaller cruise ship than 4,000 passengers. I think the economy of scale dictates it. I think the fact that they can make more money with a bigger ship dictates that. And I think that it's the reality that Royal Caribbean lives in. It's just, I would be utterly shocked if it's anything smaller than 4,000 passengers. I think, quite frankly, it might be even bigger than that. But the real question is, how tall will it be? Because there has been, now I would really have to do some research into figuring out if there are actual quotes saying that the ships were supposed to replace ships that could fit into these ports or not. Because, when you talk about replacing the Vision class, that doesn't necessarily mean replace them size-wise. That means replace, A for B, like we're taking this ship out, putting this ship back in. And I think maybe some people have assumed that that means, oh, it's going to be a ship that can do the same kind of itineraries that a Vision class ship can do, a la cruising out of Baltimore or Tampa, which have bridges that prevent bigger ships from getting there. Again, I don't know. Maybe they'll have a different hull design. Maybe they'll have it be very long but wide and not very tall. Who knows? But I really think it'll be like 4,000 passengers or so. I just really can't believe they would go for anything smaller than that. I just don't think that the way that Royal Caribbean operates from an economic standpoint is going to allow for anything smaller. It's not that they can't make money with a smaller ship, it's that they make way more money with a bigger ship. We've seen this time and time again. Bigger ships make more money because of the economy of scale. When Royal Caribbean talks about, and they talked about this back in the pandemic when they were restarting operations and they had to, put on a good show for Wall Street. They talked about that newer, bigger ships are more profitable at a faster rate than older ships. Now, they were really talking about, of course, getting the ships back into operation and that kind of context, but the principle holds true in this case. And so when you're talking about the Discovery class, I really do believe that they're going to be looking at it from that perspective of like, well, it'll be smaller, and they'll be using air quotes there. But beyond that, I just don't think you're going to get something that's, less than 4,000 passengers. Even 3,500, 3,000. Listen, I don't know more than you guys do. Sometimes I come into these episodes and I know things, I'm not allowed to talk about them. This is not one of those situations. I don't know anything more than you guys do, other than the project is certainly still happening from all we can tell, and these quotes back it up right there. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. There were some other quotes here that are not relevant to the Discovery class, but I thought, since we're talking about new ships and rumors, we'll talk about this a little bit. Of course, we already know Legend of the Seas is coming out next year, and then Icon 4 is coming out in 2027. And Royal Caribbean has said that the fourth Icon class ship is going to have, quote, a pretty ambitious set, quote, end quote, of new activities and features on board. And there, of course, there is still those orders for the fifth and sixth ship. Royal Caribbean has what's called an option on those. So they haven't exercised them yet, but if they wanted to, they could order a fifth and sixth ship still at this point. So you've got that. Also, one thing about Legend, the Pearl, according to Mr. Schneider, will take on a new dynamic inside of it that we're unbelievably excited about. So whatever that means. I think it's just going to mean right now the Pearl is, it's a beautiful staircase with some nice lighting, but I think it's going to go beyond simply lighting. I imagine it'll be much more like my keyboard on my desk that has RGB and, can flash and make all sorts of light functions. I imagine. Who knows? Maybe they're thinking Las Vegas Sphere, which is what I think a lot of people always assumed that the Pearl was going to be. And then don't forget, we also have a unnamed Oasis 7 ship that's going to be debuting in 2028. According to Schneider, they have the name and the enhancements that are there. Of course, I haven't, announced anything for it, but for what it's worth, that's where they're at with that right now. So it's kind of interesting. And we're in this period right now where we have a number of ships coming out. We've got 2 more Icon class, at least. We have an Oasis class ship, but really I think the big thing is obviously also the push for the beach clubs and Perfect Day. I mean, when you get to, let's say 2028, because that'll clear out a lot of these projects that are in the works right now. I mean, Royal Caribbean is going to be a vastly different place in 2028 than they are today, and certainly 5 years ago or 3 years ago. It's going to be a very different dynamic, which I'm excited for. I love this idea of not just doing the same thing. There was another great quote that the Orlando Sentinel had in here. Yes, from Mr. Bailey. He said, quote, "When we started developing the private destinations and designing ships like Icon, we recognized this was no longer in any way a traditional cruise. It was a brand new collection of experiences that transcended cruise and moved into land-based vacation options," end quote. And I love this quote because it really does encapsulate what I think Royal Caribbean's been doing for a number of years now, starting with Perfect Day at Coco Cay, and now moving forward with these new beach club operations with the Icon class. And that is, they're not looking at it through the lens of a traditional ship experience where, what a cruise would have been defined as 5 or 10 years ago. I think they really want to look at it as, it's the focus. People say, is the ship the focus, or is the destination the focus? I think they're looking at it as a blend of both. Whereas before it would have been really, well, you're going on a cruise in order to visit some amazing places, and now it's that blend. It's like, well, the ship is a destination, yeah, but also these places are a destination, and the way that the experience transitions from ship to shore, back to ship, because if you're on an itinerary that goes Perfect Day and goes to a beach club, it's a little more seamless in that way. It's less jarring, less like, well, you're off the ship. Good luck. I remember this has nothing to do with anything, but I remember we were in Havana, Cuba on Majesty of the Seas. And I remember walking off the ship and some officer, I forget if it was the hotel director or whoever, he was doing this in a good natured way, but he was laughing and waving to all of us, say goodbye to the air conditioning. And to me, thinking about it now, it's almost a metaphor. Yeah, there was no air conditioning in Cuba, but it's like a metaphor now, because it's like when you used to walk off the cruise ship, like it was like, it's like a director and cut. That's the end of the cruise experience, the end of the Royal Caribbean experience. You're on your own. Good luck. I don't know what's going to happen to you over here. Hopefully we'll see you back in a couple hours before all aboard. And I think Royal Caribbean wants that to be a little bit different. Not totally, because you're still going to visit places that Royal Caribbean doesn't own or operate. But I really do feel like there's more of that natural transition, more of a seamless approach to it. So anyway, the Discovery class, when will they announce it? When do I think they're going to announce it? Once upon a time, I thought they were really targeting like 2030 for it to launch. Now that we're 5 years out, I mean, if they announce it before the end of the year, I suspect that could still happen. But it seems like every day that they push it off, it's probably going to be another day or two before we see that. And I only say that because it just seems like the runway becomes shorter and shorter in order to get in for a 2030 day. Keeping in mind, by the way, that we have Oasis 7 coming out in 2028 already, and that was already announced however many years ago. So I just feel like, given the amount of years they need before they can, place an order and the ship will be ready, and this will be the first in the class. First in the class always takes longer than other ships within the class. That, to me, it just seems like, you're talking minimum 2030 at this point. But, we've seen different targets. I remember last year there was an interview that Michael Bailey did, and it's on video. It's like it's his voice, it's him, and he talks about on video, oh yeah, we'll announce it before the end of the year. And that didn't happen. I mean, he didn't promise that. He said he hoped that they'd be able to announce it before the end of the year. The end of the year being 2024. Obviously, we're now 3/4 of the way through 2025, and still no word on it. So, with Royal Caribbean, they won't announce something until they have something to announce. But it's just interesting with this particular project because, again, they've done everything possible but actually reveal or announce the project formally. So, but they keep hinting and alluding to it that, like, it's one of the worst kept secrets within Royal Caribbean. I mean, of its existence anyway. Beyond its existence, that's actually a very well kept secret. They haven't divulged one detail about it. But it'll be interesting to see. I just hope we're going to get, like, information sooner than later, because like you, I am getting tired of speculation. I just want confirmation. I want to start planning. I want to start getting excited for it. All right, friends, time to answer listener emails. This is part of the episode where I answer emails that you have sent me, and we answer them right here on the podcast. You can just email me, matt@royalcaribbeanblog.com. Make sure it's royalcaribbeanblog.com. I imagine there's a lot of email that goes to matt@royalcaribbean.com, and that's not me, and I don't get those emails, and no one's ever forwarded them to me. So apologies, whoever that is at the cruise line, but those emails are going unread. But matt@royalcaribbeanblog.com, I'll gladly read. First email is from Everett. Going to Coco Cay in January. Any advice on the pool area to go to that might have warmer pool water? Does Hideaway Beach have heated pools? Thanks. Yeah, so there's two places at Coco Cay that have heated pools. One is Hideaway Beach, you are correct on that, and the Coco Beach Club. And yeah, January can get a little chilly over there. And by little, I mean a lot. I mean, I know I'm a flirt-in now, and everyone makes fun of me for being sensitive, overly sensitive to how quote-unquote cold it is. But I legitimately believe the Oasis Lagoon pool is freezing in January. It's pretty much cold a lot of months of the year because they dump that water a lot. And when they replenish it, it gets very, 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 very cold. But that's actually a great idea. The Coco Beach Club or the Hideaway Beach obviously for 18 plus. Coco Beach Club available to all ages. Both have heated pools. We did the Coco Beach Club in December and January of this past year, and that was such a huge. I mean, I got a good deal on it because of Black Friday, but like if we had not done that, it would have been too cold to go in even the ocean was fairly cold. We had a cabana at the Coco Beach Club and we didn't go in the ocean at all. I think somebody put their foot in the water for a little bit, but that was about it. So yeah, the Cocoa Beach Club and the Hideaway Beach are definitely the way to go. Keep in mind, by the way, when the Nassau Beach Club opens, it will have heated pools. So that's something else to remember. Next email is coming to us from Jeff. Hello, Matt. Avid podcast and YouTube watcher. Glad to see you went back to Europe. I have an Alaska cruise that I booked with Jen at MEI Travel. We're going on a 6-night pre-cruise tour through Royal Caribbean. I'm a massive planner, so I have to find information about Royal Caribbean's cruise tour through RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com. I listened to an older podcast years, but it was slightly more focused on the experience versus logistics. One of the things about a Royal Caribbean cruise that I love is your ability to plan the majority of the experience by booking excursions, drink packages, restaurants, and the general uniformity of the experience itself. The cruise tour is subbed out to another tour company, so Royal Caribbean doesn't provide assistance in planning, and certainly won't have the same Royal Caribbean experience as being on board. Jen, unfortunately, has not been on a cruise tour, but I'm finding a lack of information about the tour on the internet. So I have quite a couple questions. What happens when you arrive a day early ahead of the tour? Is there any availability to do laundry on the land tour? How do you find a listing of optional experiences and how do you pay for them? Does reserving a ship boarding time make a difference? Is there a difference boarding procedure with luggage? How can you pay for upgrades on the train ride, and how much cash you need for tips, and how easy it is to get around in your free time? I'm not writing you for answers, just letting you know this information is very difficult to find. As you always looking for content, I wanted to offer you up, share my experience. Well, Jeff, consider this an open invitation to email me answers to every single one of those questions, because I think those are great questions. I've not done a land tour. A land tour, if you're unaware, is an option Royal Caribbean offers in Alaska primarily. They do have some, I think, in Europe on some itineraries, but basically it's an extension of the cruise. In Alaska, you go on a 7-night cruise, and then at the end of the cruise, or actually before the cruise, depends on which one you pick, there is a land portion in which Royal Caribbean escorts you over to, like in the case of Alaska, you go to Denali and aka Mount McKinley, and a couple other places that you can't access on a cruise ship because you go in the interior of Alaska. And since you're already in Alaska, it's actually a great way to experience it. Plus, you get crown and anchor points for every night of the land tour. The only way you can earn points outside of a cruise ship. So, kind of interesting, Jeff. I'll tell you what, buddy. When you get back from this, please let me know, because I'd love to hear answers to those questions. Our next email comes to us from Haley, who's 12 years old. I started listening to your podcast 2 months ago. Pretty soon, me and my family are going on a cruise with my cousins. This is my third cruise and my cousin's first. I feel like I have overwhelmed them about everything about cruising. The more I talk to them, the more they get less excited. Do you know how I can talk to them and get them excited about Symphony? Also, we're going to Baja Bay Water Park in the Bahamas. It's our first time going. Do you know what fun things you can do there? Thanks so much. So, first of all, Haley, thank you for the email, and I apologize for taking a little longer to get back to your email on this one. How do you get people excited for a cruise? It's very easy to do exactly what you said you did, and I do this all the time, where like you talk people's ears off, and then they're like, okay, I don't care anymore, like just please leave me alone. Ultimately, Haley, you can't force people to be excited for it, but you can certainly do something. Like, as an example, what I like to do, sprinkle it in. Send them the ship tour that we have of Symphony of the Seas on our YouTube channel for RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, right? So they say, hey, here's the ship. And then maybe send them an article about a cool thing you can do on board. Like, don't be like, daily updates, but more like, you sprinkle it in. And I feel like that might help your cause a little bit to, get them in that mood, so to speak. But hopefully if you sprinkle it, that might help your cause. I feel like there's an old saying, less is more. And I feel like in this case, you want to tease them. You want to be like, oh, here's this cool thing we do. Yeah, it's coming up soon. You know what I mean? So anyway, thanks for the email, Haley. Next email is from Phil. Hello, Matt. Love your podcast. Very much a loyal to Royalites. I've been always curious. We're someone on a cruise and early on the cruise. If someone were on a cruise and early on the itinerary missed the ship, would have left its port a call. If you were able to get to the next port with the ship docked there, you get back on the ship with your car to continue as the cruise is planned. That's a great question. My understanding is yes. I think for most people in that scenario, they just go home because it's probably easier logistically to get back home than it is to get to the next port. It depends, obviously, on a lot of factors involved, like what is the next port and where you're going, right? Like, Phil, if your next port is Coco Key, well, you're not going there. There's no way to get there. But if you miss the ship in Cozumel and the next port of call is in Costa Maya, I mean, you could do the drive. It's about 8 or 9 hours, but I guess. But I think even then, some people say 8 or 9 hours. It's 5 o'clock now because you missed the ship. The ship is going to be there. Some people might say instead of driving all night to make it there or taking a rickety old airplane to get to and from, they're just going to fly home because it's just like probably they're frustrated, upset, etc., etc. I don't know the rules about it. There are some regulations in the U.S. if that were to happen, but we'll skip over the PVSA for a second and simply say that I believe you could, but I've never put it into practice, number one. Number two, I don't have a specific experience or example to share with that. But, I mean, they've always joked about it, like, oh, if you miss the ship here, it's this many hours to the next port, or we'll be in, something like that. I don't know. But I do know what Royal Caribbean is supposed to do if you miss the port of call is they take all your stuff and leave it in the pier. They empty your stateroom, leave it with the pier agent or somebody, and go about it that way. So, yeah, maybe that kind of forces your hand as well. Next email is from Scott. Hello, Matt. Thanks for everything you do. We recently cruised on an adventure this season, the Eastern Caribbean, and had a wonderful time. We had one question we couldn't get an answer for. On 419 in the dining room, our server had a trident pin that he wore directly above his name tag, giving the impression the handle of the trident was behind the name tag. He didn't wear it any other night, and we saw no one else with it. Sorry for the grainy picture below. I asked him what it was for, and he joked it was because he was Aquaman. And while he was a superhero server, I'd have to tell him he wasn't built like Aquaman. We asked the assistant server, and he didn't say either. He was an amazing service. We really think it was some sort of communication or commendation, rather, or award. Any ideas? So he did send me the photo, and as he mentioned, it's a trident. If you remember the old Royal Caribbean plastic drink stirrers, that's what it looks like. It's made out of metal, not plastic. And it goes behind his name tag. Not in his name tag, but behind it. So his name tag obviously has a pin behind it, and this trident goes behind it through the pin, like behind the pin, if you will. I've never seen it before. I cruise a lot, I think. I'm not, and I don't want to sound pompous or arrogant about this. I want to say that given how often I cruise, and I haven't seen it on anybody else, I think it might just be someone's idea of a good design. Like he just thought, oh, it's kind of nautical. Maybe a guest gave it to him. I have seen that before, where guests give people something and they use that. Because I can't ever recall seeing this in any other waiter, and I could be wrong. You all know I'm wrong about a lot of things. I think this is the waiter doing his own thing and decided to, for whatever reason, maybe it was a gift, maybe he thought it was a cool idea to put that in there. And part of the reason why I think that is also that the I guess the head of the pin, like the trident part of the trident, like not the handle, but like the actual like prongs, kind of look like the Royal Caribbean Crown and Anchor logo. I think that leads me to believe that. I mean, you would think that if this were something that was an award or a commendation, like there would be other people that have had it. I've never seen it. I'm not saying, Scott, it's not. I'm just simply saying I haven't seen it. So either he's such a legend that nobody else has it, or this is just a fun way to have this particular person decided to decorate his costume. I don't know. Next email is from Steven. Hey, Matt, big fan of you and Royal Caribbean blog. I feel guilty if I don't watch you live on Mondays. You do a great job. I have a question about insurance. My wife and I get Royal Caribbean's vacation protection plan. I looked it up online and spoke to a rep who pointed me to the website and said there is medical and medical transportation insurance. It's only $39 a person. Am I missing something? That is really cheap. Am I missing something in the wording, meaning that the price does not include injury, medical transport coverage? It seems to me at that price, everybody should get it. I know you cruise a lot and use Allianz, but we cruise up to twice a year. Not sure what prices are supposed to be. Any input would be appreciated. By the way, if you've never had deep dish pizza from Chicagoland, I'll try to send you one. First of all, Scott, thank you for the email. Deep dish pizza is not pizza. It's pasta and with bread on the bottom. I will not willfully call it pizza, but I've had, oh gosh, we have a chain here in Florida that's from Chicago. That serves that, but I mean, I can't bring myself to do it. It's not real pizza. So anyway, to answer your question, it is a form of travel insurance. Travel insurance, this is something, Scott, it's a really good question because travel insurance is not all the same. This is a really, really, really important concept. So like, I think a lot of people understand, okay, it's really helpful to have travel insurance, but they don't quite understand that it's not like flood insurance. If you buy flood insurance, it's one policy, sold by FEMA, everybody gets it. It's all the same. Like it's one and all. Travel insurance is more like auto insurance. You can get cut rate insurance. You can get really comprehensive ones. So what it really boils down to is what does the policy actually include? And if this is why it's so important, in my opinion, to compare plans. Like I use Allianz as an example, but if you go to like a website like insuremytrip.com, they will break down the plans. And Royal Caribbean is different because you can only buy through Royal Caribbean. So they won't have that one there, but you can kind of Once you see what other plans have, you can go back to the Royal Caribbean policy, which is underwritten by, I believe it's AIG or Travel. Yeah, there's a couple other companies. I forget which one it is. It's underwritten by another company. Royal Caribbean doesn't actually do it. There's just a third party that they just like not whitelisted, but white label it. Anyway, the point is if you go to travelinsurance.com or insuremytrip.com and you start comparing policies, you'll see, okay, well, this policy has this much money, because it's not so much that it covers it, it's how much money does it cover. Because, you might have, trip interruption coverage, but is it like $5,000 or $30,000? And, the difference depends on, of course, well, how much coverage do you need? Well, it depends on obviously what you're looking to cover yourself for, especially as it relates to fares like airfare, hotels, things of that nature. And just like car insurance, you can have, personal injury liability that covers, I'm making up numbers now, $10,000 versus $500,000. There's a big difference, obviously, depending on how much damage there is to you or the persons in your car. And it's kind of similar here with car insurance. So number one, travel insurance is pretty cheap. Even a very expensive policy is probably only going to cost you, maybe a couple $100 at the most. It's not that expensive. Like all insurance, it's a gamble on the insurance company that you're not actually going to use it. And let's face it, more than likely you're not. And number two, they price it in a way to, cover more likely scenarios than the oddball ones. Like you being medevaced by a helicopter in the middle of the ocean by a private company is pretty rare to happen to begin with, let alone is it likely to happen. So there's a little bit of that game involved with it. But the bottom line is it cheap? Yeah, I'm not surprised that it's only $39 per person. It also depends on the sailing, how old you are, a couple other factors. But I agree with your conclusion, if you will. And that is that everybody should get travel insurance because it's cheap enough that it just makes a lot of sense. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Royal Caribbean Blog Podcast. Thank you for listening, and be sure to let me know in the comments. By the way, if you haven't subscribed yet on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube. It's our #1 driver now of YouTube audience. And it's okay if you listen on iTunes or Spotify or anywhere, Google Play, but the YouTube experience is fun. Plus, we have fun artwork on there, and it's a great community, so check that out. Until next week, I'm Matt. We'll talk again real soon.